Adam Curry, John C. Dvorak.
It's Thursday, August 8th, 2019. This is your award-winning Gibbo Nation Media Assassination episode 1162.
This is No Agenda.
Assessing America under assault and broadcasting live from the frontier of Austin, Texas, capital of the Drone Star State. In the morning, everybody. I'm Adam Curry.
And from northern Silicon Valley, an area plagued with white supremacists, I'm John C. Dvorak.
It's Crackpot and Buzzkill in the morning.
They're there too?
Oh, everybody, all these Democrats in the Silicon Valley, they're all white supremacists, it turns out.
And what evidence do you have of this?
I heard it. I read it.
Uh-huh.
The Canadians think so.
So do the Brits. So does the rest of the world. This is quite the assault on the United States.
We are a phenomenon. Who knew?
We are the biggest racial bunch of a-holes in the universe.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
Well, it's worse than that.
What do you mean of worse than that?
Well, I mean, what do you mean? What do I mean? Let me see if I have this clip here. It's funny that you should mention anything because then I realize I don't have my glasses, which I have to go get while you're playing this clip.
Okay.
This is the MSNBC clip.
Yes, insanity.
Yeah, the insanity clip.
Where not only is the internet facilitating the speed of radicalization, but our leader, our chief executive, is seen as almost a mentor and a radicalizer. And unfortunately, today, we did not hear what we needed to hear from that person that these extremists and unstable people look to. He spoke in the passive voice, in the collective voice. We didn't hear first person from him. We didn't hear I condemn white hate ideology. We heard the nation must condemn it. Well, the nation does condemn it, but we didn't hear what we needed to hear. So what happens is the extremists interpret what the president read off a script today as something he needed to say, something he didn't really want to say. So the president's either getting really good advice and rejecting it, or he's getting really bad advice. And I'll give you an example of that. We have to understand the adversary and the threat we're dealing with. And if we don't understand how they think, we'll never understand how to counter them. So it's little things and language and messaging that matters. The president said that we will fly our flags at half-mast until August 8th. That's 8/8. Now, I'm not going to imply that he did this deliberately, but I am using it as an example of the ignorance of the adversary that's being demonstrated by the White House. The numbers 8/8 are very significant in neo-Nazi and white supremacy movement. Why? Because the letter H is the eighth letter of the alphabet, and to them, the numbers 8/8 together stand for Heil Hitler. So we're going to be raising the flag back up at dusk on 8/8. No one's thinking about this. No one's giving him the advice, or he's rejecting the advice. So understand your adversary to counter the adversary.
I know you're keeping your options open there, Frank, but as chilling as that is to hear, you're saying it is possible that someone who knows better is authoring or editing the words that show up and are read verbatim, or are supposed to be read verbatim by the president.
You know, I'm glad you almost got the full clip, and I'm glad you did that. A lot of things, particularly on conservative Twitter, are being played without context. And you even missed, I think, the context of what this is. Frank, what's his name?
Nucci or whatever. He's an ex FBI top dog.
Well, that's why it's important to have it in context. Most people didn't even have that much when they showed a clip of this guy talking. It was just, oh, Trump is ready, or setting the flag on 8/8 Hitler, 8/8 This guy.
You know, I always thought, by the way, HH meant Heil Hydra.
Okay, so the point is,
I'm sure the Marvel fans out there will appreciate that. Anyway, go on.
This guy is the former assistant director of the FBI, and if we go back to the beginning of this interview, it's a little more interesting than just. Although out of context on Twitter, all you saw was, this guy's crazy, numerology, blah, blah. You had here that he's explaining, hey, wait a minute, someone may be writing speeches for the president and he doesn't know what he's saying. They may be slipping stuff in. But it's a little bit worse than that because this guy made some predictions.
5 days ago, Frank Figliuzzi, the former FBI Assistant Director for Counterintelligence, wrote the following in an op-ed in the New York Times, and we quote, "Instinct and experience tell me we're headed for trouble in the form of white hate violence stoked by a racially divisive president."
Gee, imagine that. And the former FBI Assistant Director predicting violence from white supremacists just 5 days before it happens. On the 6th day, a cycle perhaps, it happens.
He has chosen a re-election strategy based on appealing to the kinds of hatred, fear, and ignorance that can lead to violence. And once again tonight, we have Frank Figliuzzi back on our broadcast. Frank, what were the signs, and how do we know how to navigate this tomorrow and the next day? This starts becoming the definition of terrorism when people develop anxiety about what should be free-flowing public places.
Totally scripted between the two.
Not that, it was pathetically scripted, and the fact that Williams or any normal journalist didn't push back on this HH nonsense, which is just a creation of maniacs, is beyond me. I mean, it's not beyond me because MSNBC works, like this is what they do. They got these scripted segments and they go back and forth and they read the script very well. But yeah, you're associating it with the cycle and the terrorism malarkey and all the rest of it.
I'm just saying, why does this guy predict something? It happens 5 days later. He shows up. Then he's talking all kinds of stuff like them. He essentially says there may be people in and around in the White House and around the president who are true white supremacist Nazis who are slipping stuff in. And to be fair, the president did not mistake Dayton for Toledo. That was in his teleprompter. And I'm not sure how that got in there. If you do Toledo white supremacists in 2015, there was a huge neo-Nazi clash in Toledo, Ohio. I'm not so sure he's completely off base. I'm not sure he's not off base. I don't know. But I'll tell you, there are provocateurs out there in the left-wing media, and they're doing a really good job. And I have another example. Let me just do the second example. This is another thing that Republican conservative Twitter lost their crap over, and this is Nicole Wallace. This is the clip that most people saw.
The last Republican president fought for, sought, and it's not ideal, but had 44% of Latino vote. It was so politically powerful inside the last Republican administration. President Obama used the power of the presidency to try to pass comprehensive immigration reform with the Latino community, Latino leaders at the table. You now have a president, as you said, talking about exterminating Latinos.
What were you yelling?
What comprehensive immigration reform did Obama try to pass?
Just listen to the clip, and then you'll see what...
I'm sorry. Go on, play it.
You now have a president, as you said, talking about exterminating Latinos.
It's not...
Okay, so you now have a president who's talking about exterminating Latinos. Of course,
when did he do that?
Of course, people lost their shit over this, and she had to come up with some half-hearted apology about that she misspoke, etc. But if you really listen to what she says...
You now have a president, as you said, talking about exterminating Latinos.
She says, you now have a president, as you said, because this guy she's talking to, Raul Reis, R-E-Y-S, who is on the editorial board of USA Today, has no Wikipedia page, only bios on the internet about what he's done, who he works for. He just shows up everywhere. There's no background. I'm telling you, this guy is a provocateur because he indeed did put this in her head. Nicole Wallace is a simpleton, so she picked that up and used it stupidly. But listen to this guy.
And with regard to the president's remarks, sad to say, I don't really see at this point anything he can do. In words and actions throughout his presidency, he's basically declared open season on Latinos because we are one of his favorite targets. And it's not just the language he used. You mentioned calling Mexicans drug dealers and rapists when he came down the escalator. That was day one. Then it escalated into attacks on Latino journalists. It escalated into attacks on the so-called, as in his words, the Mexican judge. Then he ramped it up again to the invasion, the warning people of the caravan, and words like infestation. What do you do with an infestation? With an infestation, the conclusion is to attempt an extermination. So to me, there's very little distinction between his inciting this violence and the fact that it is now happening, because
So you can hear this guy said it. She referred back to him. She's an idiot. But this guy is a spook, or he's something. He's some kind of provocateur, and I have no other information about him other than he's on the USA Today editorial board, which is concerning by itself, saying these types of things. So there is something going on, a concerted push, a real effort, and we've abandoned everything now. We've abandoned Russia, everything else that the president... Now
it's in the rotation, so it's, we haven't abandoned that.
But this seems to be the all-in way that they're all going, and worse, what really irks me is what the president said. This is really, I've not seen it so bad in the United States as this. And I pulled a couple of clips from his statement that he read off the teleprompter, uninspired. This is where if you can go back and look, and you'll see that he is reading Toledo from the teleprompter. In fact, it even looks like for a moment he realizes that can't be right, but he still reads it. But what did he say?
The shooter in El Paso posted a manifesto online consumed by racist hate. In one voice, our nation must condemn racism, bigotry, and white supremacy. These sinister ideologies must be defeated. Hate has no place in America. Hatred warps the mind, ravages the heart, and devours the soul.
So notice he's taking the manifesto at face value that this guy did it, even though there is evidence to the contrary. Here is the owner of 8chan, where the manifesto, so-called, which we looked at in detail on the last show, where the shooter uploaded that. Now, 8chan is it's basically a bulletin board where you can post stuff, and you can do that anonymously. The guy who runs it, I think the servers are in the Philippines. He makes his money by advertising on 8chan kind of odd travel books, which, sketchy travel books about weird stuff you can see in different countries. I don't care, but he made a statement about this being uploaded to 8chan.
First of all, the El Paso shooter posted on Instagram, not 8chan. Later, someone uploaded a manifesto. However, that manifesto was not uploaded by the Walmart shooter. I don't know if he wrote it or not, but it was not uploaded by the murderer. That is clear. And law enforcement was made aware of this before most people had even heard the horrific news.
And by the way, he put the TAPS bugle under it. That's just the drama of how he wants to present this. But notice, he could know by device identifiers, IP addresses, etc. He said, whoever uploaded that manifesto, it wasn't the guy who was posting on 8chan previously. You don't hear about that.
The spirit and letter of the law have always been faithfully fulfilled, and my company has always made certain of that. It is unfortunate that this place of free speech has temporarily been removed.
All right. So for the president to take this in his speech, and he's reading it, so he's responsible for it, to take it at face value as the truth or as a single guy who did all this is just factually not true. We know it now. He should have known that. Then here's the president again.
We must seek real bipartisan solutions. We have to do that in a bipartisan manner that will truly make America safer and better for all. First, we must do a better job of identifying and acting on early warning signs. I am directing the Department of Justice to work in partnership with local, state, and federal agencies, as well as social media companies, to develop tools that can detect mass shooters before they strike. As an example, the monster in the Parkland High School in Florida had many red flags against him, and yet nobody took decisive action. Nobody did anything. Why not?
Now, the Parkland shooter was mainly family members and friends who called the FBI and complained about him. There was only one small posting, if I recall correctly, on, I think maybe it was Instagram, but that was really not a social media case. Now the president is talking about working with social media companies to identify problems, which he'll call red flags in a moment. And I don't know, is he going to stifle people? Is he now going to work on deplatforming? If any of this is planned, that is, and just the fact that they want to go snooping around is almost a direct violation of Fourth Amendment rights. This is an outrage.
Second, we must stop the glorification of violence in our society. This includes the gruesome and grisly video games that are now commonplace. It is too easy today for troubled youth to surround themselves with a culture that celebrates violence. We must stop or substantially reduce this, and it has to begin immediately.
So calling out video games is old trope. There's no scientific evidence, nor is there scientific evidence that the litany of movies from Hollywood and television shows have similar influence. Tarantino's latest Bloodbath is in theaters now. No mention of that. Now, for sure, video games is a huge industry, and maybe it conditions kids. This president, our president, is the guy at the front of the military, the most murderous machine ever built in history. Oh, yeah, but let's not have a culture of violence anywhere. What he doesn't mention, of course, is that these things by themselves, may spur someone on, but how about the combination of drugs, combination of SSRIs, psychotropic drugs? Not a single mention about that.
Third, we must reform our mental health laws to better identify mentally disturbed individuals who may commit acts of violence and make sure those people not only get treatment, but when necessary, involuntary confinement. Mental illness and hatred pulls the trigger, not the gun.
Okay. So he's saying this, of course, to distance everything from guns from what's going on. What is he going to do now? If you're angry and you post something hateful, are you going to be picked up and involuntarily incarcerated because you may be mentally ill? Oh, we just have to check you, Mr. Curry. Just make sure that everything's okay. Make sure that you're not completely out of control. Very dangerous shit that's going on here.
Fourth, we must make sure that those judged to pose a grave risk to public safety do not have access to firearms, and that if they do, those firearms can be taken through rapid due process.
So are we going to go straight to Rob Reiner's house and take away any guns he has because he appears mentally ill? I mean, may think it's a good idea, but it could happen to me.
That is why I have called for red flag laws, also known as extreme risk protection orders.
Now, none of this is an executive order. He's just reading from the script. But when he says extreme risk protection order, I feel an executive order coming on pretty soon. And it's literally going to be like a Gestapo force that is going to check on you online if you're okay, if something's not wrong with you. We'll do a little sanity check. Oh, you got some guns. Let's take those away first just in case. Red flag.
Today, I'm also directing the Department of Justice to propose legislation ensuring that those who commit hate crimes and mass murders face the death penalty, and that this capital punishment be delivered quickly, decisively, and without years of needless delay.
Understanding where the president's coming from, that a lot of mass shooters sit in jail for years and years and years on end, I understand what he's saying, but you put that in combination with a red flag, maybe some mental health issues, clear hate. oh, I'm sorry, we got to go kill you now. I mean, I know it sounds a little extreme, but is it really when you hear what he's saying?
These are just a few of the areas of cooperation that we can pursue. I am open and ready to listen and discuss all ideas that will actually work. And
now, the way he says that, maybe he's negating all of this, and maybe that's a signal saying, well, this is all bull crap. I'm just saying it, so I'm open to ideas that will really work, but I don't like it.
That will actually work and make a very big difference. Republicans and Democrats have proven that we can join together in a bipartisan fashion to address this plague.
Already, the government is swinging into action on this. They are loving it. Here's a former Department of Justice official. This is where they're taking the president's words.
Can the FBI alone track domestic terrorism, or does it need all the agencies of government?
It needs to be approached the same way we approached, again, international terrorism after 9/11, which is working with foreign governments and foreign law enforcement and foreign intelligence agencies to track the trends, figure out who the radicalizers are, because white supremacy is not unique to the United States.
Now, do you hear what she's saying? We need to work with foreign governments. Why? Because the Fourth Amendment prohibits the government from snooping around your business in the United States. But just like they did with the FISA warrants, they use the British intelligence, Italian intelligence, any one of the Five Eyes, they'll use them and send that information to us. Then we'll go pick them up. That's what she's saying.
So this has become a global problem. We need to treat it as a global problem, which means information sharing between governments. It means information sharing between the federal government and states and locals. And it means information sharing with the public, with the American public, to help people to understand terrorism is not just Islamist extremist terrorism. Terrorism and terrorist acts of violence can be motivated by any ideology, far right, far left, anything.
Mary McCord, thank you for being with us.
Now, one more and then I'm done with the rant. This is a former Obama DHS stooge.
And yet President Trump is saying he will now give the FBI whatever they need to tackle it. So what tools do the FBI need?
Well, of course, we need, more undercover long-term investigations into those who are plotting terrorist acts. I think there's a good lesson to be learned in the Countering Violent Extremism program. We actually had the first 3 organizations in 2018 that were given grant funding. However, that funding was pooled for countering violent extremism among white nationalists. So we need to reconstitute that and have an equal distribution of funding and resources for countering violent white nationalism.
But how does the FBI track people who go online to these sites like 8chan and become radicalized incredibly quickly?
Yeah, so here in America, we have a Bill of Rights that gives constitutional protections to people. One of those is the freedom of speech. And so the FBI's hands are kind of tied until they have a criminal predicate or probable cause to investigate. So how they go about monitoring these social media websites is by contracting it out with private companies who don't have those limitations.
That's how you circumvent the Fourth Amendment. It's a beautiful system. This is outrageous. And I can't believe that. Where's Fox News on this? Where's Tucker Carlson virtue signaling about how dangerous this is? Nowhere. Is no one picking up on this? Am I an idiot? Am I overblowing it?
Well, you're definitely ahead of the pack.
Okay. I'm protective of my rights and yours.
Now, a couple of things that I wanted to, if you could back up, unfortunately, you already passed this up a mile ago, but I was intrigued, and I'm not going to say you're right or wrong about this or you're hysterical, but I was intrigued by the notion that there's an agent provocateur in the White House planting coded messages supposedly to white supremacists, although it'd be more likely to be coded by a left-winger in the White House who is slipping these terms and these ideas in, like raising the flag on 8/8
yeah,
as a tribute to Hitler. You have to be somewhat nuts to even think that. But if there's some guy in the White House because he seems to be working in concert with that guy that you had interviewed. That guy who was on the FBI guy that was on Brian Williamson.
Yes.
Told us stuff that was didn't make any sense unless there was actually something going on. And this guy knew about it as part of a concerted effort to do this, to just embarrass the president by putting in coded messages using the wrong words or
I've never seen this, Frank.
Raising the flag on 8/8.
Have you ever seen this Frank Figliuzzi before? I'd never seen him before.
Well, apparently he's on MSNBC all the time because when Brian introduced him, he says, "Welcome back."
Yeah. Well, we missed him the first time. The BBC also did something very interesting. Just speaking of coded language, and this time a little more obvious. This is from BBC World News. This is the report that came out at 1 p.m.
President Trump is heading for the sites of mass shootings in Ohio and Texas amid warnings that he will not be welcome. The shootings left 31 people dead. Mr. Trump's rhetoric has been blamed for inciting hate crimes against immigrants and ethnic minority groups.
Okay, been blamed for inciting hate crimes against ethnic minority groups. 1 hour later, this is the headline.
President Trump is heading for the sites of mass shootings in Ohio and Texas amid warnings that he will not be welcome. The shootings left 31 people dead. His visit comes amid a continuing row over whether Mr. Trump's choice of words in his tweets and speeches has contributed to white supremacist violence. The president denies this.
Oh, I guess they got a call from somewhere. Hey, you're off message, BBC. Get it back to white supremacy.